It's not every day a franchise legend reaches 1,000 games in the NHL. On today's show, honoring Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. On today's show, we're going to pay tribute to one of the game's underrated players, someone whose game I've admired for a long time, someone who as a person has carved out a really nice career for himself in Edmonton, celebrating the 1,000-game milestone for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who reached the benchmark on Sunday night in the game against the St. Louis Blues, where he, of course, opened the scoring. So to start out, we'll talk a little bit about the context, the bigger picture, being picked first overall, when he was picked, what it meant to the organization. Then in our second segment, we'll pivot to talking about the production, what he's done as a player, why he's managed to stay effective for so long. And then in our final segment, we'll talk more about the guy, the journey, and what it means to make it this far in the NHL. So to start out, anytime you were picking first overall, regardless of sport, something went wrong the year before. And sometimes teams make concerted efforts to pull back, to organize themselves around a younger cohort with the intention of giving them reps, taking it on the chin, losing games, and eventually having the chance to win the ping pong ball lottery in the case of hockey. And post the 2006 Cup final run, the Oilers largely were stuck where in this pocket of picking highly in the draft, and they picked first overall several years in a row there in the early 2010s. And draft picks alone do not guarantee results. First overall picks alone do not guarantee results. And you think about the first overall picks post 2005. Hell, you throw Ovi in there too. Ovi's 04, Sid's 05. Eric Johnson, Patrick Kane, John Tavares, Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Niall Yakupov, Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes. I could go on, and Nico Heischer's in there. Owen Power's in there. Rasmus Dahlin is in there. Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini. We are talking about franchise-altering players. And when you get picked first overall, a team is staking its future on you. And that's more than just wins and losses. Those are coaches, those are executives, those are general managers who are staking their careers on the capacity to channel what you've shown as a child, in the case of hockey, into a player that can win games for you at the NHL level. And there's a real tipping point in that relationship as the franchise savior. When you get picked first overall, there is an expectation that you are going to be so singularly talented that you can elevate what's around you. And some years the players are a higher caliber. Some years they aren't. Some years there's not a lot of clarity of who the first overall pick should be. And it creates a dueling school of thought, perhaps, where different players, different priorities for different organizations. But in the case of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who went first overall when he did, the Oilers had Taylor Hall in the fold and were looking to get to that next place. And it can take time to accumulate enough players, especially when you're not going to be that active in the trade market or free agency because you're not trying to be competitive yet. It can take a while for those guys to develop, to become NHL caliber players. I've spent a lot of time the last few weeks diving into player development because of the woes the Rangers are going through and some of my other work. And Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, as an 18-year-old thrown into the fire of the NHL, 18-plus minutes per night on a team that picked first overall consecutive years. That in of itself should tell you just how dire the situation was at the time. And candidly, if you're going through an honest-to-God rebuild and you're trying to do it the right way, giving the 18, 19-year-old 19 minutes a night in a low-stakes environment, That's not a bad way to do it. Now, a lot of teams don't have the patience to give those young guys the run there, and they want to supplement them with quality veterans, and they want to try and be competitive while developing those guys at the same time. And in the vast majority of these cases, that doesn't work. Now, you think about the fact that Nugent-Hopkins plays 4 years before he gets to the postseason for the first time. The Oilers get there in 2016-17. They lose in the second round, but they showed you something. And then it takes them another 3 years to get back to the real playoffs. I'm not counting the bubble playoffs where they lost to Arizona. But all of this is to say, lost to Chicago, if I remember. Yeah, they lost to Chicago in 2020. All of this is to say, I want players I take first overall to be franchise altering. I want them to set a standard, and I want them to help the situation out. And from a raw talent perspective, the Oilers might not necessarily be overwhelmed by what Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has given them. He's not a McDavid, a McKinnon caliber player, but he hasn't needed to be. And yes, do we get the benefit of hindsight when we're evaluating Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and saying, well, McDavid came along, Draisaitl came along, so the magnifying glass came off of Nuge a little bit? Yeah, for sure. But I think something that can be underrated when we're talking about defining a player's career is what they mean institutionally. And it's why having these long-term players who've been in the same place for a long time matter. Because when you have someone like Nuge, who's been around through good times and bad, he has a wealth of experience to draw upon. And you have someone like that around to set a standard, an institutional standard, so that when you have younger guys come around, you have Nuge to say, well, this is how we do things here. We're the Oilers. This is the standard. And you have the credibility of having been there for so long. You have the credibility of the success he's had, both as a player prior to getting drafted and in the NHL. And you manage to play effective enough hockey for as long as Nuge has. You carve out an important role for yourself. And even now, in his mid-30s, Nuge is still giving the Oilers valuable minutes, and we'll talk a little bit about his production for his career and the season in our next segment. But just materially, what Nuge means to the organization, the city, I think you got a really good glimpse of it on Sunday night. Number one, the ceremony, crowd was vibrating. And then the roar when everyone realized his shot was the one that went in to open the scoring. The Oilers ultimately win that game 5-0. That was loud. That was playoff loud for that goal. Everybody just absolutely enthralled. And most of all, when we're talking about guys who managed to hang around for this long in one place, it tells you a lot about who they are as a person, because it's very easy to get sick of people, especially when the team isn't performing well or you're not living up to expectations. And through good times and bad, Nuge has always had that little muted smile on his face. He has always gone out there and done his business. He has played a litany of roles up and down the lineup in a variety of different situations and given themselves a lot to be proud of. When we talk about a guy making it to 1,000 games, only 417 have ever done it in the history of the league. We're more than 110 years into this project. Next year will be the 111th season, 110th season of NHL hockey if we're going by the 1916-17 season as the first one. And in that time, we've only had 416 guys prior to Nuge on Sunday reach this threshold. This is a major milestone, and to be the first guy to ever do it for the Oilers, an organization that has Gretzky's and has Messier's and Paul Coffey's and McDavid's and Draisaitl's and Yari Curry's, that's nothing to sneeze at, man, to accomplish something like that. And we are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, we'll dive into Nuge's career production, why he has bounced back from last year's lows production-wise, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers. We've got your team covered every day. There's absolutely nothing like an NHL game. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it's unmatched. Watching at home on TV is great, but being in the building, totally different. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually the tickets themselves. Long queues, endless screens, and prices that change right when you're about to check out. That's where Game Time comes in, giving the advantage back to the fans. It's a hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few tapped. You pull up the Game Time app, there are so many great features. My personal favorite is the panoramic seat view. If you click on a ticket listing in the app, they will show you what the view of the ice looks like from exactly where you're sitting, so you're not surprised on game day. They have zone deals where you choose the section and they find the best deal in the section. And most importantly, they are backed by the Game Time ticket guarantee for real peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Thank you so much to everybody making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club. The link is down in the description. During Oiler games going forward, Monday to Friday, I will be hanging out in the members-only Locked On Oilers Discord channel server, including a group chat just for listeners like you to talk all about the Oilers, answer questions, or just commiserate about what's going on in the given game. The link is down in the show notes if you want to sign up. As we continue our conversation celebrating Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I think anytime a player doesn't reach that coveted superstar level first overall, there's going to be a negative connotation around them. I think when you look at guys like Alexis Lafreniere, I think when you look at, I would say Nico Hischier, though I think he's a superstar. I know there are a lot of people who are underwhelmed by what Owen Power has been so far, though I think he's making progress. I think Juraj Slafkovsky, up until this year, could have been in that conversation as well. Now Yakupov, of course, but for the most part, when you've drafted first overall in the last 15 years, your floor is a Taylor Hall caliber player who won the Hart Trophy, and then you throw in McDavid and McKinnon and Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes and Bedard and Celebrini. There have been so many great players to go first overall, and I do think we are getting better with the draft process and understanding what types of players and traits are going to translate and how we get the most out of our guys. But when you look at what Nuge has done, he's played more than 80 games in a season 5 times. That type of durability is extremely valuable. He has played first-line minutes for the vast majority of his Edmonton tenure. Now, he hasn't always been a center. He hasn't always been a wing. He's been willing to play both. I think coming out of this past weekend without Draisaitl, who's away in Germany dealing with family stuff, seeing Nuge go back down the middle, the Oilers play reasonably well in those minutes was awfully encouraging. As someone who has kicked around the idea of seeing Nuge as the third-line center come playoff time to elongate the lineup, maybe elevate the capacity of guys like Savoy or Howard as running mates down in the bottom 6 and giving that bottom 6 a little bit of more offensive oomph. I think Nuge is dependable enough, especially when it comes to his defense, that you can get away with that as your third line, even though Howard and Savoy don't have a wealth of experience and neither has ever played in an NHL playoff game. And when you think about a guy who, as an 18-year-old, gets thrown into the deep end of the pool, there are plenty of guys who get drafted in the first round and they need 2 or 3 years to get their feet under them. Right away, as a rookie, Nuge plays 62 games, 52 points, and he's at almost 18 minutes per game. Within 2 years, as a 20-year-old, 56 points, 24 per game. That's the one of the higher seasons in terms of his average time on ice of his career. But as a 20-year-old, he's already in the deep end, and he is doing everything. Nuge has been a consistent presence on both the power play and the penalty kill for pretty much the entirety of his Edmonton tenure. And when you look at where he's at now, the type of role he's carved out, where he's effectively a niche specialist. He's not being asked to do anything particularly high leverage. He doesn't have to carry the puck in transition. He doesn't have to do a lot of forechecking. All Nuge has to do is use his positioning and use his brain. And those are the types of guys who manage to age very well. Someone like Nuge, who has managed to stay pretty healthy in his NHL career, in conjunction with having that high hockey IQ and that good positioning, has been able to become a perennial 65-point guy. And 65 points is not world beating. For his 82 game pace is 23 goals, 41 assists for his career, so that shakes out to 64. That's not world beating, especially considering he hasn't played 82 games all the time, obviously only in 5 seasons. A normal Nuge season on average is 19 goals and 34 assists. As a fringe star contributor who on occasion has gone crazy, he had the 100-point season a couple years ago where the power play was nuclear, that is really valuable. And yes, Nuge has a wide range of outcomes. We saw kind of the low end of that last year where he only checked in with 49 points in the regular season in comparison to right now, as we sit here through 41 games, he's at 40 points. The goal differential is still negative on the year, which is something that I think with time is going to write itself out. I think when you think about how rough the Oilers were in October and November, how bad the goaltending was, made sense that him and McDavid without Zach Hyman were kind of struggling 5-on-5 to get the puck in the net. Now, when it comes to production, we have a few drivers. The most important one, of course, being ice time. Nuge, by virtue of being a consistent power play guy, is always going to have a pretty high floor when it comes to his power play production. The average Nuge power play season is about 35 points almost on the power play. So when you go and look at it just in terms of the power play, we're talking 15 assists and we're talking 6 goals. So 20-ish power play points per season as a baseline. You throw that in conjunction with McDavid and Draisaitl, who are both going to be north of 100 points. Hyman, who's a 30, 40 goal guy. Hyman, who is only going to play 60-odd games this year, is going to have a chance at being a 30-goal guy. He's already at 18, and he's only played 20-some-odd games, so that's awfully encouraging as well. But where the power play shines, and why I think it's interesting in the context of Nugent-Hopkins, is that everybody has a very defined role. And this is something I talk about incessantly, that we want to put guys in a position to do what they do best. And when that comes to Nuge, that's his playmaking, that's his intuition, is knowing where to be and knowing where the play is going to go. And on the power play, where there's so much high-end talent and all of those guys play with such a great level of anticipation for what the others are going to do, it's notable that Nuge has managed to stay up there, and Nuge continues to be a powerful presence on that man advantage. When you think about where he's been maybe at various points in his career this year, he's already got 14 power play assists, which is more than he had last year, and he's halfway to the power play. He's already got the same number of power play goals as he had last year with 7. And again, we're only 40-some-odd games, 41 games into this NHL season, which tells you just how important it is for the Oilers to get the most out of their guys. And correction, Nuge has played 41 games. The Oilers have played 50. So the fact that he's already almost at his assist total and his power play total from last year, and there hasn't been a massive jump. The power play last year was like 11th. This year, it's been the best in the NHL. So yeah, it's going to help everyone's counting stats when a guy gets to eat more effectively, when there's more fat to chew on, there's more offense to go around, there's more opportunities to go around. That does matter, and that's going to always buoy some strong that is always going to buoy some strong special team stats, because those are a lot more fickle, those are a lot more prone to variance. But the simple matter of the fact is, Nuge has been better this year than he was last year, and the power play is the most obvious situation, because that's where the Oilers have made the biggest jump in their team year over year. Hell, their underlying numbers are worse this year than they were last year, but the power play is so much better. Everyone's counting stats are going up to be better than they were last year, in spite of the fact that even though the majority of the game, about 75-80%, is played at even strength, it doesn't really matter because the power play has been so good. Now, that will lead to issues when it comes to the playoffs, but in the present, in the moment, regular season, it is a hell of a shortcut. So on that note, we are going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to wax poetically about the journey Nuge has been on and why he means so much to the city of Edmonton and the Oiler fans. Thank you so much to everybody who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we pay tribute to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins reaching the 1,000 game milestone. And for me, anytime I get a little cynical about hockey at large, anytime I'm frustrated, I think about the incredible journey these guys go on. So you think about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's born in British Columbia, gets drafted to the WHL as a 15-year-old, plays 3 years in the WHL. And the journey you go on as a youth player. And make no mistake, we think of junior hockey as a semi-professional entity because there are stipends and because there's travel and there's practice and there's a glimmer of luxury to playing junior hockey that there isn't, say, to college hockey in the United States, or maybe what you would think of in a men's league in Europe. But it is as grueling and taxing physically and mentally as you can imagine. I mean, it's always mind-blowing to me to think about being 15 or 16 years old, having to move away from home, having to move in with a billet family, and having to figure it out, how much we ask of these guys as kids. I think about how immature I was at 15 years old. I couldn't have moved out and lived with strangers and tried to chase my hockey dream. I would have lost my mind. But you think about the level of commitment, the level of talent, and just the sheer need to be great that drives these guys. And the crazy part is, this is years in development. And we're talking about kids. We're saying most of these guys are picking up skates for the first time 3 or 4 years old. Maybe you got some crazy ones that are 2 years old. But those first 10 years of your life are largely about figuring out how to exist, about how to manage your feelings, about how to work in groups. And from the time you're 3 or 4 years old through 15 or 16, and you get drafted to the WHL, the OHL, the QMJHL, wherever you end up, you've already put in more work into hockey than most people ever will in their entire lives. And that's just to get your foot in the door. As we have seen so many guys be promising at the junior hockey level, put up great counting stats, look the part, dominate at the World Juniors, look like a future NHL star, only to get to the NHL and realize whatever it was about their game that worked at lower levels doesn't translate, or you can't get along with the coach, or you can't get good line mates, or you're being asked to do things you're not good at. And in spite of everything, and just thinking about the probabilities of making it to the NHL as a junior hockey player, let alone just a person, is not great. To be so good at junior hockey, to get in the conversation to be the first overall pick and be selected as the first overall pick is hard to fathom. We are talking about infinitesimally small probabilities. And for someone like Nuge, who doesn't have world-class traits, he doesn't have McDavid's speed, he doesn't have Austin Matthews' shot, he doesn't have a Uri Slafkovsky's size. He is a very well-rounded player. I would say Nuge is pretty solid at everything. He doesn't have any major holes. He's not elite at anything, but because he is so good to great at everything, he's managed to carve out a really nice career. Because he has the versatility to play center or wing, because he has the defensive competency to kill penalties and to win faceoffs from time to time, he has unlocked a different stage of his career. And I think anytime we're talking about longevity, there are so many factors that go into that. Most importantly, health. You got to stay healthy. If you accumulate a lot of injuries through your career, it's harder to keep getting back up, to keep rehabbing, to keep trying to get healthy, to go out there and play again. And guys like Nuge, who have had, knock on wood as I knock on my desk here, really good luck injuries-wise for the majority of their careers, that keeps them at a higher floor. Because when you get injured, that the healthiest you can be over time keeps getting lower and lower until you reach a tipping point and you just can't get healthy anymore. Number two, to have the longevity to play 1,000 games in one place means you're pretty good vibes-wise. Nobody's getting sick of you. Nobody thinks you're immature. Nobody thinks you're a problem. If anything, if you're getting to play 1,000 games with one team, you're probably a pretty good guy that people want you around, that you are helpful. And then you think about the fact that he's versatile enough to play a variety of positions, both center and wing, to play power play, to play penalty kill, and to always be a really good complementary piece to stars. That is an underrated skill, I think, in the context of hockey, to be proficient enough in enough areas of the game that you can competently make Connor McDavid better, make Zach Hyman better, make Draisaitl better, make Bouchard, when we're talking about the power play, better. That's a really underrated trait. And it's one of the things that really shines through about Nuge's game is his hockey instinct. He is almost always in the right spot at the right time. His decision-making is very sound. And that, again, that gives you a really high floor. You think about being a good vibes guy and having positional versatility and having the capacity to elevate star players through your hockey instincts. It's going to unlock a lot of doors for you. And to go from a 15-year-old for the Red Deer Rebels, all the way up to where we're at now, where we're talking 417th player ever to reach the 1,000-game mark, that matters. And you can unlock a lot of doors in the hockey world by just focusing on what you're good at, by just doing what you're told. And Nuge, to his credit, has carved out an upper echelon NHL career. There will be people out there, I'm not one of them, who would say, well, if he was my first overall pick, I would have wanted more. Things changed. If McDavid and Draisaitl don't come along, maybe Nuge is the one putting up 75, 80 points a season, and his counting stats take a bit more of an inefficient way of getting there, but gets more counting stats because there are simply more opportunities to go around. And to his credit, this year, after last year, where I was pretty concerned about Nuge and thought maybe he was done being a close to point per game producer, he's doing a tremendous job this year of being a valuable resource, both at even strength and on the power play, to have 40 points in 41 games, and to be on a power play operating at this level shows such a level of skill that's really, really impressive. And then the last thing, when you stay in one place as long as Nuge has, you get involved in things like Kids Sport Edmonton or Face Off with Cystic Fibrosis because it's your responsibility. It's one thing to be a professional athlete. It's another thing to be an institution the way Nuge is. It's another thing to be so woven into the fabric of the city and to embrace that city as your own, even though you're not natively from there. Now, you would ask Nuge, and he would probably tell you, I am from Edmonton, even though he didn't grow up there, because he's become a man there. And that's one of the crazier things to me. You think about drafting an 18-year-old and where Nuge is at now, 13, 14 years later, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of miles. We are talking about so many seasons on the bus, on the plane, and still managing to not just be a guy, but managing to be a positive impact on your team and your city. This is your dream outcome for 98% of NHL players. The vast majority of guys would sign up to have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins' career. He has been a real presence for a long time, and he's the type of player that doesn't come around all that often. And yeah, could he have ended up a little more high-end or explosive or dynamic? Probably, but it doesn't matter because everything has worked out in the end. And he's still managing to be a really effective NHL player, even to this day. With all of that said, that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's edition. Tomorrow's show, we'll probably dive into more about the defense, but I'm not positive yet. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcast to get the latest episode. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Oilers ad-free, plus access to the members-only Discord server and so much more. Head to the link down in the show notes to join the club. I will be in there during Oiler games Monday to Friday, the rest of the regular season, commiserating about the Oil and answering questions. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make your second listen NHL game night on Locked On NHL. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.